Oh, hello, it's John Heaton. Enforced change of location here. Hope you can see me and hear me okay. So, had the pleasure, like most Dylan fans, of listening to the new album for the whole of the weekend. It came out on Friday, so started off from Friday morning, and a couple of times Friday, a couple of times Saturday, a couple of times today. So I think I'm on my fifth or sixth listening. A lot to absorb. There's 70 minutes of Dylan music on this album, albeit we'd heard three of them in advance, so maybe just over 40 was new. Just before I go into my thoughts on it, the reviews of this album were unanimously favourable. I counted out an incredible number of five-star reviews. I've never seen this, can't remember seeing this degree of acclaim for an album in a long time. 5 stars from the Telegraph, 5 stars from the Times, 5 stars from the Financial Times, 5 stars from the Guardian, 4.5 stars from Rolling Stone. Didn't give a rating, but a very favourable review from LA Times. Same with New York Times. 5 stars from the BBC. I think 4 stars from NME, and second review in the Guardian gave it 4 stars. So nothing less than 4, and most of them 5. I will say there is a tendency among music critics to maybe over-exaggerate the greatness of a modern work by an icon, because I noticed the same with Paul Simon. His recent albums have all got acclaimed, even though I didn't rate them too highly. With Dylan, I think most of his recent albums are good, but I wouldn't necessarily say they're all 5-star. But and I don't actually think this one is quite 5-star, but it's pretty close. It's certainly 4.5. So he also did an interview to promote this album and to talk about recent events like the lockdown and the George Floyd affair and stuff. So he gave his views on that. And as always on a Dylan album, he's commenting on the world, and one doesn't quite know what he means in a lot of cases, and one can guess or assume in others. So really up to the interpretation of the listener in many an occasion, because he's not crystal clear on who he's pointing the finger at. But that's one of the beauties of Dylan. He doesn't need to be specific and name a specific individual, because some of his songs, both the ones written in the 60s are relevant today, and the ones written today might be also relevant in 30 or 40 years' time. So I'm all for not being too specific on certain individuals. I think it works better without being specific. So, well, I'm going to talk about, let me think. I Contain Multitudes was the second song to be released in advance, and was more of a personal song than the Murder Most Foul stuff, which I'm going to talk about, which I already did a separate video on actually, so maybe I'm not going to talk about it too much. But I Contain Multitudes, again, a perfect description of Bob Dylan, really. The many sides of, another side of was even the name of one of his albums, and he amusingly rhymes multitudes with I play Beethoven sonatas, Chopin's preludes, I contain multitudes, and then later I paint landscapes and I paint nudes. And another rhyme is I drive fast cars and I eat fast foods. I contain multitudes. So that's a good track. I mean, I'm not going to necessarily give this a mark out of 10, but I would give that a solid 8 or 8.5 probably. There I did. I just did give it a mark out of 10, but I'm not sure if I'm going to do it with all of them. The second track, False Prophet, is not one of my favourites on the album, to be honest. It's based around the blues chord changes, as are 2 other songs on this album, and quite frankly we've heard Bob do blues type songs all the way through his career, from starting off with, well, probably earlier, but the earliest one I can think of is Leopard Skin Pillbox Hat, and then you've got stuff all the way through his career, whether fast or slow versions of the blues, like Meet Me in the Morning from Blood on the Tracks, and then you've got tracks off Love and Theft. I can't remember the name of the one I'm thinking of, and then there's one, I Can't Wait, from Time Out of Mind, which is also blues influenced, but that's made perhaps more interesting by Daniel Lenoir's production. So the 3 blues songs on here on this album are probably my least favourite. Well, maybe not Crossing the Rubicon, because that's got great lyrics, but the other 2 probably my least 2 favourites on the album. Not much to say about False Prophet. Interesting words as ever with Bob, but that brings us on to the 3rd track, which is probably, if push comes to shove, my highlight of the whole album. I've made up my mind to give myself to you, and it's a very tender ballad. It's very reminiscent for me of When the Deal Goes Down from Modern Times. By the way, can you believe it's 14 years nearly since this Rolling Stone cover came out at the time of Modern Times? So it doesn't seem like 14 years since this album Modern Times came out. Since when I've lost two close friends of mine who were both Dylan aficionados, David Bloomfield and Sean Bodie. And every time a Dylan album comes out, one wishes that they were still around to discuss it with, but they're not, unfortunately. But rest in peace. So where was I? Yeah, made up my mind to give myself to you. Is just a beautiful ballad, and Bob's singing it well, actually. Whereas on Tempest he'd almost lost the will to sing, he's singing quite nicely on this album. So maybe those standards albums that he did maybe taught him how to sing again. But he's singing very tenderly on this, and it's very moving, and some of the words are great. Like, if I had the wings of a snow-white dove, I'd preach the gospel of love. A love so real, a love so true, I made up my mind to give myself to you. Well, my heart's like a river that sings. Just takes me a while to realise things. I've seen the sunrise, I've seen the dawn. I'll lay down beside you when everyone's gone. I travelled from the mountains to the sea. I hope that the gods go easy with me. I knew you'd say yes, I'm saying it too. I made up my mind to give myself to you. I'm not sure who the object of his affection is on this song, but it's pretty nice, heartfelt lyric, especially, well, for anyone. But Bob's 79 years old, so if he's just recently fallen in love, then that's great. I don't know much about his personal life. I've stopped following it, to be honest. Probably he wants it that way as well. He doesn't like people interfering. I missed out. That was track 4, I think. Missed out My Own Version of You, which is a bizarre 3rd song on the album with very compelling lyrics and good music backing on all of this album, by the way, using his touring band for the most part. And some amusing words. He's kind of playing Frankenstein a bit. I'll take the Scarface Pacino and the Godfather Brando, mix it up in a tank and get a robot commander. If I do it upright and put the head on straight, I'll be saved by the creature that I create. Gonna make you play the piano like Leon Russell, like Liberace, like St. John the Apostle. I'll play every number that I can play. I'll see you maybe on Judgment Day. After midnight, if you still want to meet, I'll be at the Black Horse Tavern on Armageddon Street. There was a pub called the Black Horse at Exeter, one of my favourite haunts, and that was not on Armageddon Street. I forget which street it was on, but it was a great pub. Fond memories of that. Black Rider is a soft sort of dig at someone. I'm not sure who the hell he's talking about, but it's got some amusing words, and whoever is the victim of his lyrics is probably feels quite belittled by Bob's words. What the best line probably is, Black Rider, hold it right there. The size of your cock will get you nowhere. So then we've got this blues track I was talking about, Goodbye Jimmy Reed, which one of the reviewers saying was the nearest to classic Dylan on the album, which I disagree with. I think we don't really need too many of these blues type songs. The words are reasonably interesting, but not overly so. They're a bit random on this song, in my opinion. For example, I don't know who he's talking to. Is he talking to Jimmy Reed, who passed away in 1976? Is he talking to God? Because he's saying, for thine is the kingdom, the power and the glory. Go tell it on the mountain, go tell the real story. Tell it in that straightforward, puritanical tone. in the mystic hours when a person's alone. Goodbye Jimmy Reed, Godspeed, thump on the Bible, proclaim a creed. That left me a bit baffled, that line, to be honest. Anyway, it's not a bad song. And then we've got, I didn't write the names of the words down, but I think I remember all the tracks here. So we've got Mother of Muses next, I think, which is kind of a hymn-like song, and it's okay. It's not a great favourite of mine. He's paying tribute to all kinds of people in history, like Martin Luther King and Elvis, but he's also paying tribute to several military generals, which is slightly out of character for Bob. Like he mentions Sherman, who's a US Civil War general for the Unionists. He mentions Zhukov, the Soviet commander from World War II. He mentions Montgomery, and he mentions Patton. But overall, this song reminded me of a track like Ring Them Bells or from Oh Mercy, which I think is superior to this, quite a bit superior. And even Lenny Bruce, the song from Shot of Love, it reminded me of that a bit, and I think Lenny Bruce is a better song. So I don't think this song is one of the more successful cuts on the album. We've now got Cross the Rubicon, which is the third of the blues numbers, and probably the best of the three, because the words are quite arresting. And, Cross the Rubicon, I was reading my history. Julius Caesar in 49 BC crossed the Rubicon River, which was then the northern border of Italy, and hence threatening the authority of Rome, and took over as the supreme commander shortly after that, and then went on to invade Britain and rule for a few years, as we know. So since that time, crossing the Rubicon has become to mean, as a phrase, the point of no return. We've reached the point of no return, because by crossing that river, Julius Caesar was basically threatening the authority of Rome. So that's interesting. And Bob's talking about crossing the Rubicon in every verse in the song, and I'm not sure how autobiographical it is, but it's a very interesting song, and it keeps the listener's interest, even though the blues backing is not obviously not the most original. Then we've got Key West, which is a long song about which I read somewhere, was talking in the lyrics about immortality, and one of the reviewers saying this was the only song which outstayed his welcome. I kind of agree. It's not one of the more successful cuts on the album, and I'm not sure why he's talking about Key West as the place to go if you want to be renewed or achieve immortality. I looked up Key West, and it's a city in the southern part of Florida in the US, and it's the most affluent city per capita in the whole of the US. Presumably the weather is lovely, so that's one reason to go there, but I'm not quite sure why he's so fond of it. It's interesting because he doesn't come from that part of the States at all either, so there's no I don't think there's a childhood attachment, although he's got a strange line in the song that when I was 12 years old they put me in a suit and forced me to marry a prostitute. I think Dylan's imagination is running riot there. Talks about pirate stations, radio stations in Luxembourg and Budapest, of all places. But I don't think Budapest ever had a pirate radio station back in the day, and he probably just did that to rhyme with Key West, to be honest. So I think I've talked about most tracks. The only one I haven't talked about on this review is Murder Most Foul, which I talked about in an earlier review, and it's just a wonderful wander through the music that inspired Bob in the first place to take up music, the Woody Guthrie and the stuff from the 40s and 50s, rock and roll, and 60s, as well as some of his contemporaries and some of the music which he was listening to throughout his career, and even name checks a few 70s artists such as the Eagles and Fleetwood Mac. And then a long list kind of said to a DJ, play me this, play me that, to kind of get me over, because the whole thing is about the assassination of JFK and getting over the trauma of that. And obviously listening to music is quite therapeutic in times of distress, and so all the way through the last 2/3 of the song, he's just listing one song after another, which finishing with play Marching Through Georgia and Don Barton's drums. Play Darkness and Death Will Come When It Comes. Play Love Me or Leave Me by the great Bud Powell. Play The Bloodstained Banner. Play Murder Most Foul. So, I don't have the album to show you. This Ultimate Music Guide will have to be updated because it doesn't include Triplicate or Rough and Rowdy Ways, the new album. It's available on Spotify, that's how I've listened to it. The CD has not reached Hungary yet, and the vinyl's not out till July, so you're going to have to wait to see the actual physical product, but I thought we'd give you my initial thoughts. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.